Hey everybody, I'm Ghost Boy, and I'm here to talk about the top 10 best winter horror movies. And as usual, I like talking about lesser known, underappreciated movies, so I won't be including movies like The Thing or The Shining on this list. Some of these movies just happen to take place in winter, but in some of them, the snowy weather is a big part of the storyline. None of these movies are in any kind of order, but number one is definitely my favorite. Frozen. And no, I'm not talking about the animated Disney movie. I'm talking about the horror movie Frozen from 2010. After a long day of skiing, three friends get stuck on a chairlift high up in the air. The ski resort closes, and now the friends are stranded in the middle of a snowstorm and forced to make life or death choices in order to survive and not freeze to death. This movie was extremely intense and suspenseful. I have a terrible fear of heights, I always have since I was a kid, so I was scared shitless while I was watching this. As more time went on, this movie just kept getting more and more suspenseful. And just like the characters in the movie, I was on the edge of my seat. This is one of those films where the situation the characters are in is something that could actually happen in real life, and I think that's why this movie is so scary. If you plan on watching this movie, make sure you have an extra blanket nearby, because you're either gonna need it because it's so cold, or you'll want to hide underneath it because of how intense and scary this movie is. Never Hike in the Snow, a Friday the 13th fan film. Never Hike in the Snow follows the mysterious disappearance of a local resident who went for a hike in the woods near Camp Crystal Lake and never returned home. Now I know you're probably thinking, really, you're putting a fan-made movie on this list? But this isn't just any ordinary fan film. Besides the fact that it has an extremely high production quality, it actually takes place in the same world as the original Friday the 13th franchise. Let me explain what I mean. The Friday the 13th franchise never really had a main character like Laurie Strode in the Halloween movies, but Tommy Jarvis is the closest thing we ever had to a main character, because he was in 3 different movies as the main protagonist. He was played by 3 different actors, but in Part 6, Jason Lives, he's played by Tom Matthews. And in this fan film, Tom Matthews is back playing Tommy Jarvis again. And not only did Tom Matthews return and reprise his role from Part 6, but they also got the actor who played the police deputy Rick Cologne in Part 6, and he reprises his role in this as well. So this really isn't a fan film, but a sequel to the original Friday the 13th film series. Besides the times Jason went to Manhattan, Hell, and outer space, he's always been in the forest, but it's usually during summertime, and fans have been wanting to see Jason in the snow for a very long time, and it was definitely worth the wait. Seeing the woods of Camp Crystal Lake covered in snow is something we've never seen before, and it's very beautiful and ominous at the same time. And seeing Jason kill people in winter and watching the white snow turn red with blood is super badass. This is a very refreshing new installment in the franchise and something that's never been done before. If you love Friday the 13th and Jason Voorhees, then you definitely need to check out Never Hike in the Snow. Paranormal Activity, Next of Kin. A young woman who was abandoned by her mother as a child travels to a secluded Amish community, seeking answers about her mother and her extended family, only to discover that some questions are better left unanswered. Similar to Halloween 3, this movie might sound like a sequel to the other Paranormal Activity movies, but it has absolutely nothing to do with the other films, and it's really its own thing. I honestly have a love-hate relationship with this film. I actually hated it when I watched it for the first time, but only because I'm a giant fan of all of the other Paranormal Activity films, and I was very disappointed that this one wasn't anything like the others. I honestly think if it didn't have Paranormal Activity in the title of the movie, then nobody could tell this was supposed to be a Paranormal Activity movie. But if I pretend this isn't a sequel to the Paranormal Activity franchise, and I just judge it on its own, it's actually a pretty good movie. And towards the end of the movie, there's a blizzard, and it's so dark outside that the characters can't see where they're going, and it's pretty intense. Overall, if you're able to get past the fact that this isn't anything like the other Paranormal Activity movies, and just accept it as its own thing, then you might really enjoy it. The Visit. Two siblings become worried and very frightened by their grandparents' increasingly disturbing behavior while visiting them on vacation. So yeah, this is one of those movies that I can't say too much about because I don't want to spoil anything, but this was actually one of the first horror movies that I was really interested in watching when I was younger. The grandparents in this movie live in the country in a big farmhouse, and there's some really nice shots of the snow covering the countryside. I hadn't seen this movie in a few years, so I rewatched it recently, and besides a few cringeworthy scenes where the young boy starts rapping, this movie is actually really good, and surprisingly really creepy. The Devil's Pass, also known as the Dyatlov Pass Incident. So this movie is actually somewhat based on a true story. The Dyatlov Pass incident was an event in which 9 Soviet hikers died in 1959 by unknown circumstances. Overnight, something caused them to cut their way out of their tents and flee the campsite. When the bodies were eventually found, one victim had major skull damage, 2 had severe chest trauma, another had a small crack in his skull, 2 of the bodies had missing eyes, and 1 victim had a missing tongue. Most people say they died from a giant avalanche, but that doesn't explain all of the body mutilation. There have been many theories about what really happened. Some people think aliens were involved, a Yeti, the abominable snowman. Some people think it was a government cover-up. But any kind of conspiracy theories like this absolutely terrify me. So now I'll talk about what this movie is really about. A group of students return to the location of the infamous Dyatlov Pass incident to make a documentary, but things take a turn for the worse as the secrets of what really happened there are revealed. This is a found footage movie, and I think it's very similar to the Blair Witch Project, which is my favorite horror movie of all time, because it's about a girl and her friends trying to make a documentary in a very scary location, and of course things go terribly wrong. It's basically the Blair Witch Project Winter Edition. This movie really goes over every single possible theory of what really could have happened. Aliens, Yeti, the abominable snowman, time travel, teleportation, human experimentation, government cover-ups, monsters, or was it simply just an avalanche? You'll have to watch the movie to find out. If you love the Blair Witch Project like me, or if you love horror movies based on conspiracy theories and real-life events, then you should definitely watch this movie. Wrong Turn 4: Bloody Beginnings. A group of friends get lost in a storm during their snowmobiling trip, and take shelter in an abandoned sanitarium, but unknowingly to them, it's home to 3 deformed cannibals. So I've never actually seen any of the other Wrong Turn movies, but someone recommended this movie to me and told me it's actually a prequel to the other films, so you don't need to have seen the first 3 movies if you want to just watch this one. I had been looking for more slasher movies that take place in winter, and this movie was exactly what I was looking for. Just your stereotypical group of friends who make dumbass decisions getting killed off one by one. This movie is extremely gory. The death scenes reminded me a lot of the Saw franchise, because whenever someone dies, it's just unbelievably gory, gruesome, and disgusting. Overall, this movie isn't anything extremely special, but it's pretty entertaining, so if you're looking for a fun, snowy, scary slasher movie with lots of blood and gore, then this movie is definitely worth watching. Polaroid. A local outcast has no idea what dark secrets are tied to the mysterious vintage Polaroid camera she stumbles upon. But it doesn't take long after to discover that those who have their picture taken with the camera end up dying violently soon after. So in this movie, if you get your picture taken by the camera, then this paranormal entity comes after you and kills you. And I gotta say, the design of the monster is awesome and super creepy. And another thing that I thought was really cool and creative is that if your picture gets taken, then whatever happens to the picture happens to the characters. For instance, one of the characters tried burning their photo, and then their arm catches on fire. Also, it snows non-stop during this whole movie. I don't know if it was a stylistic decision or if it just happened to be snowing a lot wherever they filmed this movie, but either way, it looks beautiful and creepy, and I love watching this movie in winter. The Blackcoat's Daughter. Two girls are haunted by a mysterious evil entity when they get left behind at their boarding school during winter break. This movie is extremely eerie, disturbing, and atmospheric, and it really captures the feeling of complete loneliness and absolute despair. There was a lot of times when I honestly got confused and didn't know what exactly was going on, but then I realized that was intentional, and later in the movie there's flashbacks to some of the scenes and it's made very clear what was actually happening. My mind was blown, and I realized how great this movie really is. I was mainly interested in this film because the two main characters are played by Kieran Skipka and Emma Roberts, and I love both of those actresses, and they are incredible in this film. I was very pleasantly surprised by how great this movie was. It's definitely not your average horror movie, and it's something very different from what you normally see, but if you understand that and give it a chance, then you might really like it. Ghost Keeper. Three friends are snowmobiling in the Rocky Mountains of Canada, but their snowmobiles break down in the middle of a blizzard, so they have to spend the night in a deserted hotel with a mysterious innkeeper who's hiding dark secrets. I've always been obsessed with hotels and motels ever since I was young. I don't know why, but I always thought they were super creepy, so of course I love any kind of story with a spooky hotel involved. The hotel in this movie doesn't have power, so at night all of the characters are walking around with oil lamps, and the lighting is very creepy and ominous. The atmosphere is one of the best parts about this film. The hotel is such a creepy yet cozy setting, and with the cold winter weather, this movie has some beautiful scenery. You can see the cold breath come out of the characters' mouths whenever they talk, so you can tell they were really freezing. Especially since the hotel this movie was filmed in didn't have heat when this film was being made. This movie is extremely underrated and definitely a cult classic. I'm surprised more people don't talk about it. This is one of the best scary movies to watch on a cold winter night. And now, the number one movie on my list and my personal favorite winter horror movie is Wind Chill. So usually I avoid talking about movies that I've talked about before in my previous videos, and this is strictly a list of winter horror movies, and I wasn't going to include any Christmas horror movies in this list, but this is one of my favorite horror movies ever, so I'm breaking my own rules because this is an extremely underrated, underappreciated film. A girl is trying to find a ride home for the holidays. She ends up getting a ride from a guy who goes to the same college that she does, but along the way they get in a car accident and are now stranded on a deserted road in a terrible blizzard. As the night grows colder, they struggle to escape with their lives. This movie does a fantastic job of misleading you and keeping you guessing about what is actually happening. I won't go into detail because I don't want to spoil anything, but if you watch this movie without knowing too much about it, then I think you'll be blown away and really enjoy it. I only saw this movie for the first time last year, but I swear every single time it snows now, I always think about this movie and want to watch it again. The Ring is considered to be the perfect rainy day horror movie, and I think Wind Chill is the perfect snow day horror movie. If you're snowed in, or if it's snowing outside and you just want to stay home and watch a scary movie, then I think Wind Chill is definitely the best movie to watch, and that's why it's the number one best winter horror movie ever. Well everybody, that's the end of my list. I hope you enjoyed it. I might make a part 2 to this video because there are a few more winter horror movies I want to talk about, so stay tuned for that. But until next time, stay warm, keep watching scary movies, and I'll see you in the next video.